All right, the last section in this one is our factoring by grouping, okay, which we discussed a little bit back in like section six. We talked about it briefly a little bit when we had those trinomials that we were breaking down where there was an a value, so you had to multiply the first and the last. And when we broke it down into a polynomial, so we broke it down to like x squared plus 3x plus 6x plus 18, something like that. And then we had to find, we grouped the first and grouped the last, and we found what the numbers were. So that's basically what this is, but instead of dealing with a binomial or a trinomial quadratic, we're dealing with cubic. So we're dealing with 4 terms, and we're dealing with polynomials, not just trinomials. And so what you're going to do with these is you're going to basically factor by grouping. So you group and then factor. And so what you'll do is you'll take the first 2 terms, last 2 terms, you group them together so you can put parentheses around them. Okay, and this will have a plus sign in between. And then you want to see what can be removed out of the first group and what can be removed out of the second group. So what's the greatest common factor of the first group and the second group? In this case, the first group, you can factor out a 4n squared, and the second group, so this one you can take out a 4n squared, and the second group you can take out a negative 5. And when you take those out, they go out in front, so they look something like this. And what you'll notice is that these numbers in the parentheses are still exactly the same, n plus 2. That means that you can factor this by grouping. If you do this and you get 2 different numbers, that means that you cannot factor them by grouping, or you didn't factor out enough or didn't factor out the right thing, okay, the right number. So those have to be the same. If they are the same, the numbers I've underlined is one of your answers. So n plus 2 is one of the answers. The other answer is going to be the numbers that you put out front. So the other part of your answer would be 4n squared minus 5. Okay, 4n squared minus 5. All right, so we have 2 examples here. Okay, I want you to take a minute, pause the video, and see if you can find the greatest common factor of each. See if you can get this. Okay, we'll step through them. Let's see if you can. Okay, so with the first one, you notice that we don't have it just t to the 3rd power, we actually have it t to the 4th. And so again, what we want to do is we want to group the first and group the second. So when we group the first and group the second, what is the GFC of this first part? The GFC of that first part is 5t to the 3rd power. Okay, so it's 5t to the 3rd because we can take a 5 out of both, and then the most t's we can take out is 3. So 5t to the 3rd power. So we have 5t to the 3rd. And what do we have left over? We have 1t and a 4. So we have 1t and a 4. Now, what can we take out of the second one? What's the greatest common factor of the second one? Well, that's a 6. So we'd go plus 6, parenthesis, t plus 4. And as we see here, the numbers in the parentheses are the same, which means that's one of our answers, and the other answer is what's left out in front of it. Okay, so that's one of our answers, and the numbers out front are our other ones. Now, if you're ever confused or don't think it's right, go through and check it. So if we distribute this through and we FOIL, we see we would end up back at our original problem. Okay, so we end up back at our original problem. All right, so now with the second one, what's the greatest common factor of the first 2 terms? That's right, the greatest common factor of our first 2 terms is only w squared. So we end up with w squared, parenthesis, what's left over? 2w plus 1. And as you see, when we take out the entire thing, we have to write a 1 to hold it. Okay, we don't have 0. And now we take our second part, and of course put an addition sign. So what is the largest thing we can take out of our second group, and that would be a negative 7. So we take out negative 7, which gets us a 2w plus 1, because the signs change. As you notice, our parentheses are the same, which means that's part of our answer, and then the numbers out front is our other part of our answers. Okay. All right. So that is how we do our factors by grouping. Okay. Okay. So section 8 is our last section. It's just a bunch of different binomials, trinomials, polynomials that you have to factor. And you can use any method you want to factor them. Sometimes you will have to use grouping, sometimes you won't have to. Okay, so use whatever method you find is the easiest and the best one to use.